Welcome to Romance Files. Please like this video and subscribe to Romance Files. We're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Now, let's begin. The click of the front door lock echoed through the quiet house as Ethan stepped inside. It was earlier than usual. His meeting had been canceled, giving him an unexpected free evening. He loosened his tie, set his briefcase by the door, and paused. Something was off. The faint scent of unfamiliar cologne lingered in the air, mingling with the aroma of Lila's favorite lavender candles. The living room looked pristine, almost too perfect, as if hurriedly cleaned. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the space, a sinking feeling settling in his chest. "Lila?" he called, his voice steady despite the tightness in his throat. "In here!" came her cheerful response from the bedroom. Ethan walked toward the sound, each step feeling heavier. He found Lila ironing a deep red cocktail dress. She looked radiant, her dark wavy hair cascading over one shoulder, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. The dress caught his attention. It was one he hadn't seen her wear in years. "Special occasion?" he asked casually, leaning against the doorway. Her hand faltered slightly with the iron before she recovered, her expression a little too rehearsed. "Oh, just catching up with an old friend tonight," she said brightly. Avoiding his gaze, Ethan's stomach tightened. He forced a smile. "An old friend? Anyone I know?" "Derek." She finally looked up, and for a fleeting moment guilt flashed in her eyes before she masked it with a forced laugh. "You remember me mentioning him from high school?" "Derek." The name tasted bitter on Ethan's tongue. He nodded slowly. "The high school sweetheart." "It's not like that," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "We ran into each other by chance. He's in town for work, just in to catch up, that's all." Ethan's instincts screamed at him, but he kept his tone neutral. "Why not make it a group thing? I'd love to meet him." Lila's smile faltered. "It's really just a quick thing, nothing formal. Besides, it'd probably be boring for you, just reminiscing about old times." Ethan felt a cold wave of anger wash over him, but he swallowed it down. "Sure. Have fun," he said evenly, walking away before she could see the storm brewing behind his calm facade. As he retreated to the living room, his mind raced. The cologne, the dress, the flimsy excuses, it all clicked into place. Lila wasn't just catching up, she was hiding something, and Ethan wasn't going to let it slide. Ethan paced the length of the living room after Lila left, his mind clouded with unease. The click of her heels and the door softly closing behind her replayed in his mind like a warning bell. He glanced out the window and saw her getting into their silver sedan, dressed to perfection as if headed to a gala, not a casual dinner. For a brief moment, he considered letting it go. "You're being paranoid, Ethan," he told himself. He repeated this twice, but the gnawing sensation in his chest wouldn't quiet. Something about the way she avoided his eyes, how she had downplayed the evening, screamed deception. Ethan grabbed his phone from the coffee table and sat down. He stared at the screen, debating whether to call her. Instead, he opened the GPS tracker app installed on her car, a feature they had agreed to use after a car theft incident years ago. He told himself it wasn't spying, it was precautionary. The blinking dot on the map showed her heading downtown. "If you enjoyed this video, consider liking my video." Dinner with Derek, Ethan thought bitterly. He exhaled sharply and leaned back into the couch, staring at the ceiling. Memories of their relationship flooded him. Meeting Lila in college, falling in love with her ambition and charisma, and how she had always made him feel like the luckiest man in the room. But cracks had begun to show in recent months. Disinterest, excuses, and now this. Ethan shook his head, the anger bubbling just below the surface. If she thought he was going to sit idly by while she played games, she was sorely mistaken. The following day, Ethan made a deliberate effort to act normal. Over breakfast, Lila was as cheerful as ever, recounting an anecdote from her dinner with Derek. Ethan nodded along, his face carefully neutral as he sipped his coffee. "It was nice catching up," she said, smiling. "He's doing really well for himself, married now too." "Oh, married?" Ethan replied smoothly, masking the sarcasm laced in his words. "That's good to hear." Her eyes flicked to him briefly, gauging his reaction, but Ethan gave her nothing. As the days passed, Ethan became methodical in his approach. He started paying closer attention to her schedule, noting the days she claimed she'd be working late or attending meetings. Subtle discrepancies in her stories piled up like evidence in a courtroom. Then came the Wednesday 2 weeks later. Lila had called to say she'd be staying late for a project. Ethan feigned understanding, wishing her luck and telling her not to overwork herself. Don't miss out on the journey to 1,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button now and be part of something big before everyone else. But as soon as the call ended, he grabbed his keys and headed to her office. Parking across the street, he watched as Lila stepped out of the building around noon. Her smile was radiant, her laugh effortless as she linked arms with a man Ethan immediately recognized from old photos, Derek. Ethan's jaw tightened. His hand instinctively reached for his phone, snapping pictures as they walked to a nearby cafe. They sat close, their body language intimate, Every movement, every shared glance chipped away at Ethan's resolve to stay calm. But what happened next confirmed everything. After leaving the cafe, they walked hand in hand to a nearby motel. Ethan followed at a safe distance, his heart pounding in his chest as he captured more photos. The sight of Lila kissing Derek in the doorway before disappearing inside was like a dagger to his chest. Ethan sat in his car, staring blankly at the motel. His breathing was shallow, his thoughts chaotic. But amidst the storm of emotions, one thing became clear. He wasn't going to be another man's fool. Ethan spent the next few days in quiet preparation while Lila continued her charade, oblivious to his knowledge. He meticulously planned his next steps. He gathered financial records, hired a private investigator to corroborate his evidence, and consulted a lawyer. He wasn't just planning to end the marriage, he was preparing to dismantle everything Lila had taken for granted. On the surface, Ethan acted as if nothing had changed. He kissed her goodbye in the morning, called her during the day, and even brought her flowers. One evening, Lila, seemingly guilt-free, continued her routine as if everything was perfect. But Ethan's patience was razor thin. 2 weeks later, when the familiar working late call came through, Ethan put the final piece of his plan into motion. That evening, he waited until she left for her supposed late-night project. Then he began packing his belongings. Every photo of them together, every memento of their relationship. He left it all behind. By the time Lila returned home at 7:30, the apartment was eerily quiet. "Ethan?" she called, setting her bag on the counter. "In here," he replied from the kitchen, his tone calm and detached. She found him sitting at the table, divorce papers neatly stacked in front of him. "What's this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's time we talk," Ethan said, motioning for her to sit. As she hesitated, he slid the photos of her and Derek across the table. Lila froze, her face draining of color as she stared at the evidence. "Care to explain?" Ethan's voice was cold, void of the warmth it once held. "Ethan, please. It's not what it looks like," she stammered. "Don't insult me, Lila," he snapped. "I've been watching you lie to my face for months. This is the final straw." Lila's defenses crumbled as tears streamed down her face. She begged for forgiveness, pleaded for a second chance, but Ethan remained unmoved. "Cheating wasn't just a mistake, Lila," he said firmly. "It was a choice, and now you'll face the consequences." As Lila sobbed, Ethan stood and grabbed his packed bags. "The papers are signed. You'll hear from my lawyer." And with that, he walked out, leaving her alone to face the wreckage of her betrayal. The days following Ethan's departure were marked by silence. He ignored Lila's calls and texts, forwarding every desperate attempt at reconciliation to his lawyer. Ethan was done talking. The betrayal had severed a bond he thought was unbreakable. But Ethan wasn't content with merely walking away. He wanted Lila to feel the full weight of her actions, not just emotionally, but publicly and professionally. Ethan had meticulously documented everything. The photos from the motel, the GPS tracker logs, the private investigator's report. It was a damning dossier of evidence. He mailed copies anonymously to Lila's employer, including a note explaining how she had been using work projects as a cover for her affair. Lila's office prided itself on professionalism, and Ethan knew her image as a dependable team member was critical to her career. The fallout was swift. Within days, she was called into HR and put on unpaid leave pending an investigation. When Lila confronted Ethan about it, he didn't deny it. "You jeopardized your own career the moment you lied to everyone around you," he said flatly. Ethan didn't stop with Lila. Derek was next. The man had a wife, and Ethan wasn't about to let her remain in the dark. Through some online digging and a well-placed call to the private investigator, Ethan found her contact information. He sent her an envelope containing the same evidence along with a simple note. "Your husband has been meeting my wife at the Super 8 motel every other Thursday. You deserve to know the truth." Ethan didn't expect a reply, but a week later, he received a tearful voicemail from Derek's wife, thanking him for his courage. "She's divorcing him," Ethan thought with grim satisfaction. Before leaving, Ethan had moved half of their shared savings into a private account, which his lawyer confirmed was legal under their circumstances. Lila, blinded by her affair, hadn't noticed. By the time she realized, the divorce proceedings were well underway. Ethan's lawyer was relentless with the evidence of infidelity. Ethan was in a strong position to demand a favorable settlement. Lila fought back initially, but when Derek's wife subpoenaed him during her own divorce, Lila found herself increasingly isolated. Derek, it seemed, wasn't willing to stand by her either. By the end of the divorce, Ethan walked away with a clean slate, no alimony payments, his portion of the savings, and the satisfaction of knowing he had protected his dignity. Months passed, and Ethan focused on rebuilding his life. He poured himself into work, taking on challenging projects that earned him recognition and promotions. His colleagues noticed the transformation, and his newfound confidence attracted attention he hadn't sought but welcomed. One evening at a networking event, Ethan met Maya, a marketing consultant with a sharp wit and an infectious laugh. They hit it off immediately, and what began as professional camaraderie quickly blossomed into something deeper. For the first time in months, Ethan felt genuinely happy. Maya was different, open, honest, and supportive. She encouraged Ethan to let go of his anger toward Lila and focus on the life he was building. Almost a year after their divorce, Lila reached out. Her message was brief but poignant. "Can we meet? I owe you an apology." Ethan hesitated but agreed. They met at a quiet cafe where Lila looked visibly changed, her confidence replaced by a timid uncertainty. "I'm sorry for everything," she began, her voice trembling. "You didn't deserve what I did to you." Ethan listened in silence as she admitted to being caught up in the fantasy of her past with Derek, only to be abandoned by him when things got difficult. She had lost her job, her reputation, and the life she once had. "I regret it every day," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know I can't fix what I've done, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry." Ethan nodded, his expression calm. "I appreciate that, Lila, but we can't go back. What's done is done. I've moved on, and I hope you can too." Her gaze fell to the table. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said simply. "I found someone who treats me with the respect I deserve." Lila nodded, her smile tinged with sadness. "I'm glad," she said softly. "You deserve that." As Ethan walked away, he felt a profound sense of closure. Lila's apology didn't erase the pain, but it validated his decision to leave and reminded him how far he had come. Ethan's life with Maya flourished. They traveled, laughed, and built a future filled with trust and love. He proposed to her on a quiet beach at sunset. She said yes with tears of joy. As Ethan looked into her eyes, he realized that the storm of his past had led him to a brighter horizon. Sometimes the strongest revenge is living well, and Ethan was finally living the life he deserved. Despite Ethan's newfound happiness with Maya, the shadows of his past occasionally crept in. There were nights when he lay awake, haunted by memories of betrayal and the raw anger he had felt during those days. Though he had moved on, the scars left by Lila's infidelity served as a quiet reminder of how trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. Maya, perceptive as always, noticed the moments when Ethan seemed distant. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, she gently touched his arm. "You seem far away tonight," she said softly. "Do you want to talk about it?" Ethan hesitated, unsure if dredging up the past would help or hurt their relationship, but Maya's steady gaze reassured him. "It's just sometimes I think about everything that happened with Lila," he admitted. "Not because I miss her, but because I never want to feel that way again." Maya nodded, her expression understanding. "I get it. Betrayal like that leaves a mark. But Ethan, you're not the same person you were then, and I'm not her. I'm here for you, always." Her words, spoken with such sincerity, eased the weight on Ethan's chest. He smiled and kissed her forehead. "I know, Maya, and I'm grateful for you every day." Meanwhile, Lila's life continued to spiral downward. After losing her job, she struggled to find stable employment. Her reputation had been tarnished, not only by her affair, but by the rumors that followed her after the divorce. Derek, too, had vanished without a trace, leaving Lila to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. Friends who had once admired her marriage with Ethan now kept their distance, unwilling to associate with someone whose choices had caused so much damage. Lila found herself living in a modest apartment, far from the comfortable lifestyle she once shared with Ethan. Nights were lonely, and the regret she felt grew heavier with each passing day. She tried reaching out to mutual friends, but the warmth they once showed her was gone. For the first time in her life, Lila realized the true cost of her actions, not just the loss of her marriage, but the erosion of the trust and respect of those around her. Ethan's career flourished, and he and Maya began planning their wedding. As they worked together to finalize details, Maya suggested inviting Ethan's close friends and family for a small engagement celebration. The night of the celebration was filled with laughter and love. Maya's family welcomed Ethan with open arms, and his own family adored Maya. As the evening wound down, Ethan stepped outside to get some fresh air, reflecting on how far he had come. It was there, under the glow of string lights, that his mother approached him. "You've been through so much, Ethan," she said, her voice filled with pride. "But look at you now, you've turned that pain into something beautiful." Ethan nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I couldn't have done it without Maya. She's everything I never knew I needed." His mother smiled. "And you're everything she deserves. Don't let the past steal even a moment of your future, son. You've earned this happiness." Several months later, Ethan received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Lila. He debated whether to open it, wondering if her words would reopen old wounds. But curiosity won out, and he unfolded the letter with cautious hands. "Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for showing me the kind of man I should have appreciated when I had the chance. I know my words can't undo the hurt I caused you, but I want you to know that I've learned from my mistakes. Losing you was the hardest lesson of my life. I hope you found happiness. You deserve it." Ethan folded the letter and set it aside. The words didn't stir the anger or pain he had once felt. Instead, they brought a sense of finality. Lila was no longer a part of his life, and she never would be again. He turned to Maya, who was sitting on the couch, engrossed in a book. She looked up and smiled, her eyes sparkling with warmth. Ethan walked over, sat beside her, and took her hand. "I love you," he said, his voice steady and sincere. Maya tilted her head, a curious smile playing on her lips. "Where'd that come from?" "Just felt like saying it," he replied. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt truly free. Ethan and Maya's wedding was a beautiful, intimate affair held at a vineyard surrounded by golden hills. As they exchanged vows, Ethan looked into Maya's eyes and saw the future he had always dreamed of, a future built on trust, love, and mutual respect. Lila's chapter in his life was closed, and though the scars remained, they no longer defined him. Ethan had risen from the ashes of betrayal to build a life filled with genuine happiness. As he and Maya shared their first dance, Ethan realized that revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about reclaiming his life and proving to himself, most of all, that he was stronger than the pain he had endured. And as they spun together on the dance floor, surrounded by the people who loved them, Ethan knew one thing for certain: this was his happy ending.